Live? Oh, good evening. Welcome to the Tree Fruit Growers Collective. It's nice to have you on board tonight. Welcome to the Facebook Live and YouTube. I think is live, and we've got the school opened up, and it's nice to have you on board. Been a good week so far. Really been focused on thinning this week, trying to get the crews going, and I hope by tomorrow morning we're really going to be established out there and have the crews going full force. And we've got a lot of thinning to do. But the other thing is cherry harvest is coming up, so I would expect that by the end of this week, for sure, by a week from tomorrow, I think we're going to be picking cherries. California's all cleaned out. Sounds like California had a finished up with nice cherries down in California, so that's good. That leaves us a good market up here in Washington State, and it sounds like the pipeline's kind of emptied out. So. And we've got a nice crop. Not everyone ended up with a nice crop this year. There was some freeze damage here and there, and we're sorry to hear that. But thank the Lord, we've managed to come away with a good cherry crop in a really hot market. So, just praying that the rain will stay away this week, and we'll be able to get them picked. Just haven't had everything come together in the cherry market for about the last 6 or 7 years. It's either been the weather, or the market's been too plugged, or one thing or another, frost damage, rain damage. But boy, it looks like it really could come together for us this year. So we're really looking forward to that. I want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S. anyway, and it's that 4-day weekend. Well, we don't get a 4-day weekend in the orchards, but all the government folk get a 4-day weekend, and city and state workers and civil workers, that sort of thing. They all get a holiday off to celebrate Memorial Day. Memorial Day is for soldiers that didn't make it home, that fought and lost their lives in combat. And I served in the military 6 years. I served, jumped out of airplanes as an airborne ranger for 6 years. Served my country, so I'm proud of that. But just want to take a minute and just wish everyone a happy Memorial Day. Wish you the best on that. We're going to barbecue up some burgers tomorrow and have a good day. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right into your questions. We've got a few questions this week. If you have any questions on your mind as we go along, post those. Marlon's here helping me. She's standing by, and she usually writes those questions down. And when I get through this list that we have here, it'll take a little bit. We'll go right into those. So if you have any, just go ahead and post them online right now. And as we kind of work through these, we'll get to those in just a minute. We'll try to answer them if we can. First question is from Jerome Empey. Jerome was our very first subscriber that we had on this channel. So we're glad to have you on board, Jerome. It's been nice interacting with you. Jerome's question today is how to control and prevent mildew in organic blocks this late in the season. That's a good question. Early in the season, we rely on lime sulfur in the organic blocks to treat mildew. Lime sulfur is a great product. It'll thin for you. It'll keep the mildew out. It's not really effective on fire blight, but it will kill the fire blight bacteria, so it has a place in that. It's good for bacterial canker. It works for a whole host of things. So we love lime sulfur, but when you get out to about the bloom period, lime sulfur, or even any sort of weather, as the weather starts warming up, lime sulfur will mark the fruit. So we move away from that. Hi, Heather. It's nice to have you on board. We move away from that, and we go to what's called ProBlade Verde. ProBlade Verde. Verde as in green in Spanish. V-E-R-D-E. ProBlade Verde. It's an Omni-approved product. Been using that for a number of years, and it works really good in organic blocks. So, Jerome, I would encourage you to try that. Leventa K is a subscriber, and his question is on the grafting video posted. He said he grafted his trees intended for M9 variety change and encountered this problem from the video. What are the rules we should follow when grafting? I'm not a grafter. I'm not a great grafter, but boy, we've done a lot of grafting over the years. I want to say that on large projects, if we're going to graft over a 10-acre block, we'll bring in a grafter. We have relationships with some of the best grafters in the industry, and they'll bring in teams and they'll graft a 10-acre block in a day. They just go through them. However, we do train up a couple people. We have a couple ladies that get pretty good at that. So small jobs, going in and fixing blocks, and sometimes you get reversions out in a block, sending somebody out to get those reversions. We always try to have people, staged throughout different ranches that are capable of doing that. So there's two different types of grafters. But what I do know about grafting is if you're going to graft, it's important that you find a good place on the tree to graft. In other words, you don't want a place where a lot of scarring or scoring or rough bark. You want to find some good clean bark. So identify where that's at and cut just above that. And if you're going, you can cut those ahead of time, but leave yourself room to come back and do a fresh cut at the moment you're going to graft. That's real important. You can go ahead. We always go in advance, and we kind of cut them off, and then as the grafters come through, they'll make a final cut, and then they'll go ahead and graft into that. What else do I know about grafting? Find a good place for the cut. Find good scion wood. We'll try to go out in the dormant season. Let's say we're going to graft wildfire galas. We'll go out when the fruit's on the tree and take red flagging tape, and we'll flag the trees that have the best color that we can find in the block. We'll go identify those trees, so in the wintertime when we're collecting scion wood for grafting, we have the very best color, the very best wood, and so it's important that you find really good grafting wood and put that away for the winter. We have cold storage facilities, so we're able to put those away in cold storage facilities. But hey, you can dig a hole 3 foot in the ground and put them down in the ground, cover them up with sawdust. We've done that over the years. There's lots of ways to store that. The most important thing that I can tell you about grafting is when you graft them, you're going to paint the bottom of the tree white to keep chemicals away and kind of protect the tree. And when they're grafted, you're going to use Doc Farwell's grafting paint or whatever. That's going to be a red paint that's at the top, and you really want to keep that sealed. But the most important thing I think post-grafting is whatever you do, don't water the trees. I want you to think about that, the trunk of that tree that you've just grafted as a giant water hose, right? The water is going to tend to flush in the springtime, and the sap's going to begin to flow, and it's going to flow up through there. And you've just grafted that tree, and I don't know if you put 2 sticks on the tree or you put 4 sticks on the tree, but irregardless, just imagine that you've got this giant hose, and you're going to pour water from this giant hose into 2 little straws. And that's what's going on with grafting. It's a hydraulic issue. And so you don't want to water those for quite some time until they begin to grow through the graft union. They begin to push through there. The other thing that you can do to help with that hydraulic problem is leave what's called a nurse limb on the tree. So as you're cutting those off, find a limb that's coming off to the side and leave that. That's called a nurse limb, and it's going to absorb some of that vigor, some of that sap flow as that tree begins to push in the fall and begins to make its way up through those graft sticks, and they begin to grow. If I'm using a grafter, I always wait and I'll talk to the person that's doing the grafting, and we make a decision together when we're going to start watering those trees. Usually 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. But when you do start watering them, instead of giving them 12 hours a week like the other trees are given, the first time you water them, you might give them an hour. And the next time you might give them 2 hours. And you just kind of spoon feed them and work them through that so they don't literally explode, and you'll absolutely lose those grafts if you try to water them too fast. What else do I have? Marielle Gomez is on board. Nice to have you on board. The other thing I want to say about the grafting is make sure you have a plan. You're going to graft those sticks on there, and the very first thing you want to do when you graft those sticks is get your strings tied up. So have a plan for how you're going to train. If you're going to have a V-trellis, get right in there and get those strings on there. I've grafted an entire 10-acre block of apples before. A windstorm, and they grew up about 6 or 7 inches, and then a windstorm came up, and they just all blew off, and it just destroyed half of the block. So as soon as those things start growing, you're going to want to have a bamboo or a string or some sort of support, and you're going to want to immediately get those tied to the stick or taped to the stick so the windstorm doesn't come along and blow them off. So that's what I know about grafting. It's a pretty complex project, but we've been through it quite a bit. I'll try to post some notes on that so that we can all be on the same page. Archery Chaman is on board. Nice to have you on board tonight. Natish Kimteta says, we don't have fire blight problem, but we're suffering from Phytophthora. Heard a lot about Phytophthora this week, frankly. In M9 and traditional seedings, as per your experience with Geneva, is more suitable for us than M9. We know, as per theory, it is resistant, but we want to know your experience. My experience is I have dealt with Phytophthora over the years, a lot more in past years, and we were doing a lot of work with M106 and M9, as you mentioned, M26. Those rootstocks seem to be a little more susceptible to Phytophthora. It seems like some of the newer rootstocks, we've kind of got out of that, but still, if you get in a good heavy soil a clay soil, and those trees have wet feet. You're really wet, you have a lot of water, and poor drainage. Phytophthora can certainly be an issue. So try to pull back the water. Those trees aren't going to like wet feet. Try to have good drainage. We've even gone into blocks with Phytophthora problems and put in tile drainage so that the water will drain out of there. Check if there's some way that you can get that water to drain out of there. Again, one of the big problems with Phytophthora is wet feet. As for the, have I had better success with the Geneva rootstocks? I would say probably yes, but you can still get Phytophthora in Geneva rootstocks. I can definitely affirm that you can get Phytophthora pretty bad in Geneva rootstocks. So it's not as susceptible, but it will get it. How to treat it? Wet feet, solve that issue, that drainage issue first. But there are products out there. Linebacker is a product that you can use. Ridamil is a product that you can use that you can get on the market. So try those. Those work pretty well. Sauclane Moustache says, how many fruits should we keep on a 4-year-old gala plant? It really depends on your spacing. We have a formula for that. We want to make sure that in a mature block, we're picking 80 to 90 and 100 bins per acre, somewhere between 80 and 100 bins per acre. So we'll calculate that out, per tree. But let's see, did you give me any more? A 4-year-old gala plant. So I'm just assuming your trees are 3 feet in the row, and maybe you're a 10 foot or 12 foot between rows. Just roughly speaking, in the 3rd year, you're going to want to have about 35 apples on that tree. 30 to 35 apples. 4th year, somewhere between 45 to 60 apples on that tree. 5th year and beyond, somewhere around 80 to 90 apples per tree, something like that, in a high density sort of situation. So that's just really rough, but that's what I would expect. I would expect my trees in the 3rd leaf to have 35 apples. The spacings that I would use, 4th leaf 45 to 60, and by the 5th leaf I want those cranking out production. And that would be each tree would have to give me 80 to 100 apples. Giori Picard disease. Sorry about that. On fire blight protection, did you apply it before the rain? What period? Yes, I always really want to get my fire blight sprays on in advance of a rain. Always want to do that. I believe that they work so much better as a preventative. The fact of the matter is I'm really a naysayer when it comes to the idea that fire blight products have this window of kickback. I'm sorry, I'm just a real skeptic. I've never seen that work. I've tried so many times, and I've seen so many people chase fire blight after a critical event, and they go in afterwards and they spray that. I've never seen anyone have success for that. So I always want to be preventative. I want to have it on ahead of time. If I can't have it on ahead of time, I would definitely go back in, using a streptomycin or something like that. There's basically 3 products that we're using. We're using the product called Fireline. We're using another product called Firewall, which is streptomycin. And we try to be real careful about that. We try to only use that once, and if we can, we save it for a hail event or a bad event, or I like to use it during the full bloom period. 3rd product that we use quite a bit is called Kasuma. That's a pretty good product. Mitch Songa is here on YouTube. Nice to have you on board. So that's what we use. Also non-bearing trees. Real important to keep those covered up. Those are growing hard, and you get that shoot tip blight in there if you're not careful. So on non-bearing trees that are actively growing, I always like to keep those covered up every single week with a pound of copper. Just every 7 to 10 days I go in there with a pound of copper and cover those up, and you won't get fire blight in them, which is a really good thing. Had real good success in some really, really serious fire blight areas over the years doing that, and haven't had any issue. Can heavy bloom thinning reduce alternate bearing in such conditions? It will help. One of the aspects of solving, or at least leveling out alternate bearing that we've talked about, one of the things we've talked about is thinning early. So if you're bloom thinning, yeah, it's a piece of that puzzle, and it will help you. The fact of the matter is we love to blossom thin entire blocks. In other words, instead of blossom thinning and chemical thinning and all that, we have actively over the years tried to actually go in there at the flowering period and blossom thin the entire block. And it works really well. Like, you'll get a good crop every single year. It works really well for that. I'm not sure about on a block that's prone to alternate bear, but But on a typical block where you're just trying to get a return bloom, it's real good for that. The problems with it are it's really expensive, and it's time consuming. And you can put a 50-person crew in a 10-acre block, and they might be in there for weeks. I mean, it takes a lot of time, and it might cost anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 an acre. So it's super expensive, but it does work, and it does make the case for blossom thinning. Does help in your alternate bearing, to help you stay out of alternate bearing, or at least to come back with a good bloom the next year. I think it's really effective for that. Giorgio Giovanisciarli, hope I got that, Georgie Giovanisciarli, says, can you recommend us a book not for beginners, but for whom wants to become professional? So I recommended a book last week. I recommended this book right here, Intensive Orchard Management, written by Bruce Barrett. This book was written, how long ago was this book written? This book was written, I don't know, I probably had this book for 35, 40 years. I heard back from a couple of you as well as my wife, and I think that I might write a couple of books here in the coming years. I get a little close to retirement. I might try to update this a little bit. So be on the lookout for that. We're talking about writing a series of books on thinning and pruning and the basics. So be on the lookout for that. I recommended this book last week. If I was going to recommend a different book, I would recommend a book called As a Man Thinketh. That's a good book. I give that book out a lot. So yeah, you're an up-and-coming farm manager or any other person for that matter, I would recommend that book. That's a good book. Elroy Jetson on training video. For the apple curious, what gauge wire is typically used? Now, we talked about this last week. If I'm building the trellis, I've kind of gone to cables for the anchor. So I like to use 3/8 cable on the anchor. A lot of people still use 10 gauge wire for the anchors. You can use that. It's a soft wire. It's really pliable. You can work it around. So 10 gauge wire on the anchors. And for the trellis wires that run down the trellis, that's 12 gauge wire. So in our trellis systems, we've gone to a steel trellis. I'll show you some here in a little bit. I'm going to show you my backyard. We get those pre-stamped with the holes every 18 inches, just the way we like them. Umi Umer, what's the best solution for apple scab in walnut stage? I do not know. I don't know a lot about walnuts. I do know a little bit about scab, and scab is similar to fire blighted. You got to have the right conditions. You got to have the right amount of rain, moisture, along with heat, and you can accumulate scab in a hurry. So we have preventive sprays that we use for that. A lot of those work for mildew and for scab. But what I would suggest is watch the model. There's a model that you can find at WSU, and it'll be specific to your area, though they have those little pause states. I'm sorry, at least here in the state of Washington. I would hope your state also, if you're in the U.S. or if you, I see Umi, I'm not sure where you're at. Yeah, but if you can find a model, if you can research and find the model, we have active models here that will predict for us when you're in a scab event. And so if you can track that down, then you can get out ahead of the spray. And I haven't had scab. Scab used to be a real problem around here, 40 years ago. But we pretty much eliminated it out of the state of Washington, at least in my area. I haven't had a scab event in the last 20 or 30 years. So I think we've done a good job developing a model and knowing when it's coming and getting that worked out of the orchard. So I hope that works out for you. I hope you can find a model or develop a model. So a lot of these smart young guys are real good at coding and working up apps, and I'm sure you can make up a little model for that. Benjamin Hunnit Bill says, how far apart did you plant your backyard trees? My backyard trees are 2 feet apart, and they're rocking and rolling. Man, oh man, those things are growing. I've been out here every day training those things, getting the limbs tied down to the wire, and I might show them to you if we don't run out of time here. But yeah, planted them 2 feet apart, and they're doing really, really well. As Ref says, on Cosmic Crisp, resistance to apple scab. Yeah, so far. Fact is, I have some Cosmic Crisp planted in an area that used to be Red Delicious that were prone to getting scab. So you got some low areas that sit in there, and the dew kind of runs through there. And yeah, back in, even 15, 20 years ago, we really had to watch and put sprays on to prevent from having scab in the reds down there. And those have been in Cosmic Crisp for 5 years. and I haven't seen any scab in there. So I know that's really anecdotal, but I've never had scab in Cosmic Crisp. So far so good. I hope that helps. Derek for Apples says, planting a small U-pick. Oh, this is, yeah, Derek. I read this a while ago. Nitish, Kimley, she's on, and Perry Smith. It's nice to have you on board tonight. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Derek, nice to have you on. Nice to have your question, Derek. So Derek is planting a small U-pick on G90, and he's planning to leave them freestanding with a stake support for the first few years. I see recommendation for 10 to 15 feet tree spacing with row spacing 15 to 20 feet. What do you suggest? Of course, we're planting on a two-dimensional system, and so we like to plant those 890s 3 or 4 feet apart. Is about the most we'll get apart, but you're not. You're going to be a freestanding system, which is fine for that 890. It's going to have a pretty good rootstock on it, and we usually use the little 3-inch round poles when we're doing individual stakes, but whatever you have, you can stake those just to hold it for the first, 3 or 4 years as it begins to get a root system under it, and I suspect after 5, 6, 7 years, it'll have a good enough root to where you don't even need the support anymore. It'll do pretty well. But that's going to be a pedestrian orchard for U-pick. That sounds like a lot of fun. I really, really like that. So you want a little more room to move around, but you don't want to waste a lot of space. So yeah, I would go with your recommendation. I would plant those trees, anywhere from 5 to 10 feet apart in the row. That's about as far as I'd go. But since you're a U-pick, you could go anywhere from 5 to 10 feet apart in the row. And a 15-foot row is probably about as wide as you want to get. 15 or 16-foot row in between the rows, I think would be cool. We'd like to see pictures of that. That sounds like a lot of fun. Curious what variety or varieties you're going to have on that. But yeah, good luck with that, Derek. That sounds pretty cool. Raul Corona, what variety to use for pollinizer in corals? We're using same thing we're using in Black Pearl. We're using Lapins and Sweethearts, and those seem to work pretty well. And we may even have some index in those. I'm not real sure about that, but I think we even have some index in those. So the question is, what pollinizer in corals? He's referring to coral champagne cherries, and I believe the answer is Lapin, Sweetheart, maybe even some index. Pepper Hall says, on Cosmic Crisp, it's bred to produce less PPO. If so, how does it do with pathogens? The Cosmic Crisp, it was developed by PPO. What he's talking about is the discoloration. That's a fancy term for when you cut that apple open and it lays open. Most apples will have a tendency to color over with kind of a brown. One of the famous things about a Cosmic Crisp, it really doesn't do that. It's not prone to that. And been growing that apple now for 9 years, and so far it does really, really well in storage. So haven't really had any pathogen issues, haven't had any storage issues. Let's see the rest of this question here. Makes me weary of insect and disease resistance, or is it producing more ROS? I don't know what ROS is, to be honest with you. We have guys that work, we have a packing line and cold storage facility, and we have guys that work up there and in those systems, and they understand that a lot better than I do. But I do follow them. I do follow the crops, and I follow the storage. And so far, we really haven't had any real big issues with Cosmic Crisp. Seems to store really well. And one telltale clue about it is it has a real good long harvest window. We picked those right after Red Delicious, and it probably takes us a good 3 weeks to get across those. And they pick just as well and hold pressure just as well in the first day of harvest as they do 3 weeks into the harvest. They still have the same pressure. So again, I'm probably biased. I love the Cosmic Crisp, one of my favorite apples. Harmony Orchard's on board. Nice to have you on board. And Rajat Mokhta is on board. Thanks for joining us. Fergus Abad said, what's the difference between Cosmic Crisp and Crimson Crisp apples? I don't know the answer to that question. Crimson Crisp may be a Michigan apple. So if somebody can help us with that, I appreciate that. But I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry about that. Salvador Martinez says, how long does it take for the pollen to make it down the tube for the flower to get fertilized? Well, that's a great question, Salvador. And it really depends on a lot of things. It depends on the weather, first and foremost, how warm it is. I think it needs to be, 55, 60 degrees for that function to take place. But A lot of guys have kind of gone to follow the pollen models that they have at, Washington State University and some of these sites that actually track the pollen going down the tube and how long it takes. And boy, they've got that down to a science. They can pretty well tell by variety. I can't tell you by variety, but I can tell you just generally speaking, it's about 3 to 7 days. So in just really good conditions on a gala or a good variety where the pollen makes its way down the tube without a lot of problems, 3 days. 3 to 7 days is the short answer. So I hope that helps. Renier asked about G778. I don't know anything about that. I'm sorry. Hello, this is the name, I guess. Hi, Rob. This year we grafted a couple hundred apple trees, and nearly 100 of them got stuck in this state. Their leaves started. I think you saw a picture of that. I saw a picture of that. Kind of had an orange or a purple discolored leaves, deep maroon color on them. Additional point: the weather was bad throughout their sprouting. Now, what to do? Sounds like they didn't push. Sounds like the graft on those didn't push. Your options are, I'm not sure if you're in the U.S., but if it was me, boy, we're still doing some late minute grafting. It's probably not too late. If you're sure you've lost it, the scion, it's probably not too late to graft. If it is too late to graft, you're probably going to have to wait till the fall and bud those in the fall. That would be my best advice. Zubair Ayub on bitter pit on the school. He's talking about bitter pit here. He said, what's the treatment for those black spots on the apples that come in the last development stage? In which stage should we spray this liquid calcium, and what should be the composition? Bitter pit, by the time you see bitter pit, it's too late. There's no spray that you can put on those little black dots on a bitter pit apple once it shows itself. Once it shows itself, that apple is destined to go on the ground. Unfortunately, some apple varieties, Honeycrisp, can be susceptible to bitter pit. But you're asking specifically about the treatment and the calcium. I like to do liquid calcium from about the time the trees start pushing. From about the time the trees start pushing till about 45 to 50 days after full bloom. At that point, the tree is no longer taking up calcium, and your best way to get calcium on is going to be through a foliar spray. So once I get 45 to 50 days post full bloom, I'll switch over to foliar sprays. I don't really spend money on doing special calcium sprays anymore, but if I have a sprayer going down a row anyway and I can put the calcium in with a product, I will do that. But I only do that 3 or 4 times later as after the fruit gets a little bit bigger. Heber Hall's on board, Brett Ram, and Alan Crane. Nice to have you on board tonight. Thanks for joining us. I hope that helps with the bitter pit. That bitter pit, boy, I could write a book on bitter pit. It's a tough nut to crack, and you have to have all the pieces of the puzzle in the right place in order to get that right. The irrigation, we'll deficit irrigate those. The pruning, the biggest aspect of getting bitter pit right, it is a calcium deficiency, but the biggest factor, I think, in getting it right is crop load. It's so important on Honeycrisp. Muli Viana Honoron 7669 commented, have you used Bordeaux mixture during blossom? It sounds like that's copper sulfate and hydrated lime. The short answer is I haven't used that. Boy, I'm interested about the bloom of that. The 2 things that I would never mix would be copper sulfate and hydrated lime. So, boy, they must have some special patented mix to be able to do that. Bordeaux mixture. It sounds interesting, but no, there's just certain things that I would never put together in a tank, and 2 of those would be copper sulfate and hydrated lime. So I'd like to learn more about this. I'm sorry, I just don't know anything about it. Where do we get these type of trees structured for Y trellis? I recommended on here a magazine a couple of weeks ago called Good Fruit Grower. If you look in there, you'll find all kinds of nurseries in the state of Washington and Oregon and California. Van Well Nursery, Cameron Nurseries, Columbia Basin Nursery. We've got some really, really good nurseries here in Washington State that produce a really, really good feathered tree. So I would check out any of those and more that I'm sure I'm missing, and I wouldn't be afraid to deal with any of those. Okay, that's the last of those questions. I see we've got a few more that have came in here, but I wanted to turn our attention to, we got 2 more here. Tukaz says, Oh, these are our challenges. We took a poll this week and we asked, what are some of the lessons or the challenges that you've learned the hard way? Tukaz says, always read the label. We got several comments on always read the label and disasters that happen. And I can tell you as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, I've experienced problems with that. I can affirm that. Always, always, always read the label. There is so much to know. There's maybe one of these days I'll give a class or a talk just on the labels. But yes, I'm with you. We're in agreement on that too, guys. Always read the label. Andy Riley says that chemical thinning. Chemical thin, and then it turned off hot. The temperature spiked up, and he lost his crop of honeycrisp. Sorry to hear about that, Andy. I've had that happen to me more than once. And boy, the conundrum of chemical thinning is you have to be aggressive. If you don't go out there and you're a little bit scared by how much fruit's falling off, you're not being aggressive much. I mean, we have to, in the environment that we're farming in, we have to be able to really drive down those thinning costs. And sometimes we overdo it, and sometimes it's out of our control. And that when that weather goes up to 90, 95 degrees, you're just going to shed a lot more fruit. And anyway, sorry to hear about that, Andy. Okay. That's those questions. There's one more thing that I personally wanted to talk about this week. So I'm going to talk about my incident, my disaster. And I've had hundreds of disasters over the years, but I've had one disaster this year that I think would make a great case to talk about. I posted some pictures the other day, and I talked about some apples that I wanted to talk about, and I took the post down just because it was sparking a lot of commentary, and a lot of the commentary that was coming back wasn't really true. It wasn't actually correct. Let me clarify. So this is the picture, right? And you can see how damaged those apples are. And so I said that this was a phytotoxic reaction to chemicals. And boy, did I hear it. I got a lot of commentary back about how this is absolutely frosting. This is frost damage. And one of the reasons that I pulled it down until we could talk about it is because if I was looking at that picture and I was you, I would also say it's frost damage. So I can see why you would call that frost damage. But the fact of the matter is, it's not frost damage. So this is a big disaster that's happened to me just this year. And so I'm going to share with you what happened so that we can all prevent it from happening to us ever again. So we're going to talk about phytotoxic reactions between chemicals. Phytotoxic is something we just talked about, lime sulfur and copper sulfate. You can mix chemicals together and it'll have a bad reaction and it will absolutely damage, russet, ruin your fruit. And so that's what happened. We went out at about 50% bloom and we did a blossom thinner spray with lime sulfur. We sprayed the trees at 6:30 in the morning. It took from 6:30 to 3 o'clock to spray all of the Fujis and the Galas. So we got across the Fujis and the Galas, but somewhere around 2 o'clock, a little rainstorm came up. The relative humidity was really high, and there was a little rain shower, enough to wet the leaves and to wet the blossoms and to wet the lime sulfur that was sitting on the leaves and the blossoms. The person in charge, I'm going to take responsibility, freaked out and panicked because we're in a major fire blight incident. We've got the right temperatures. We've just got a little bit of rain. Now the flowers are wet. We're in a fire blight situation. So the person panics and they go right back in every other row with a Kasuma. So you've got the water sitting on the leaves, right? You can see the leaves here. You've got the lime sulfur sitting on the fringes of the leaves, and then you come right back in, and more importantly, the blossoms. And then we come right back in, and we spray the Kasuma on top of that. And so you have a bad chemical reaction. You have a phytotoxic reaction, and it burns a layer around the edge of the petal. So even though it looks like this damage happened to the apple, it absolutely did not. When I first noticed the damage, it was April 15th. It was like 3 weeks ago, and I only saw it on the leaves. The fact is, I only saw it on the leaves for about the first 2.5 weeks. But what happens is in the same way that a frost ring develops on a flower or on an apple, this phytotoxic reaction does exactly the same thing. We call this monkey face in the industry. I had some people comment this week about monkey face, and that's exactly what this is. So you kill the cells around the ring of that flower, and as the apple continues to develop and grow, it grows, but the section where the cells were damaged on the side of that flower do not grow, and it'll go around that and develop a morphed apple that almost looks like a monkey face. We call it monkey face. So that's what it is. That's my big damage this year. Moral of the story is never, ever, ever, number one, spray when a tree is wet in any sort of wetting conditions, but never go right back in on top of a spray when there's still a wet spray laying on the flower or the apple, and spray on top of that. You're liable to have a phytotoxic reaction, and this is what will happen. Major damage throughout the entire block. So I bring that up just so that we can all learn from that. So frost will do it. It'll damage your apples and cause monkey face and severe rusting. Spraying a tree when it's wet outside, when you have wet drying conditions, will do the same thing, but also spraying a spray with a phytotoxic reaction will do exactly the same thing. So that's my big disaster that happened to me just as recently as just the last couple of weeks, unfortunately. So looks like we have some questions here, huh? Mitch Songa says, what have you done to prevent doubling on cherries? What have I done to prevent doubling on cherries? The best thing you can do, there's a lot of varieties out there, Titan, Santana, there's varieties that come to mind. Even Chelan can be, any cherry can be susceptible to doubling. It happens during cell division in the hottest part of the summer. It really, really happens when you get those intense heats, when it turns off 105, 107, 110 degrees during cell division. That's what happens. What can you do about it? Spray those trees or those varieties that are susceptible to doubling with Surround. It's a kaolin product. It's a white powder, very safe to use. It's called Surround. You'll see trees out there in orchards that are kind of look a white color. That's what that is. That's Surround, and that's the best thing you can do. That you can also use shade cloth. We have shade cloth. You can turn the sprinklers on underneath the trees and kind of cool them down. But the key is to try to cool them off. We've had the best luck using Surround. What's your thoughts on 214 rootstock? That's from Frankie Lopez Sapero. I'm sorry, I don't have any 214, Frankie. Sorry about that. I wish I could help you. Nitish Kimleta and Harmony Orchard. Okay. Do high color strain galas have a tendency to fade in color over time? Is your regression in gala like Dark Baron or G41 because of its vigorous character? No, what will happen is the scion on those varieties, you'll get a good sport like a Buckeye, and what will happen is that's a strain, right? That's morphed into a strain, and what happens is those apples revert back to their original strain. It happens all the time. We'll have to go into blocks, gala blocks sometimes, and maybe we'll go in there every 6 or 7 years, and we'll flag the trees that aren't getting good color. We call those reverts. They've reverted back to their original scion, and we'll just go back in and we'll graft those over. We'll collect really good wood, good strong wood, identify them. We talked about that just a little bit ago, and then we'll go back in and graft those over. Those are called reverts. I wouldn't say wholesale, the whole block fades and goes back. No, I think it's individual trees, and sometimes a lot of them will have a tendency to revert and go back to their old strain. Let's see, I think I got a couple together here. Enova Apples Unisco says, till now working on M9 T337. Yep. But also started to practice on G41. Current future plans are to go with Gisela for cherry. Can you help me select a dwarf one in Gisela, please? My highest recommendation for Gisela rootstock is Gisela 6 or Gisela 12. I haven't had good luck with about anything else. I wouldn't recommend a Gisela 5. Boy, it's precocious. It'll give you a lot of cherries, but they'll be about the size of your little finger here. They'll just be really small, and there'll be way too many of them. So my recommendation for Gisela on cherries, I've had great success with these. Gisela 6 or Gisela 12 is what I would recommend. Is this new? Rajat Makta says, Which root stock do you recommend, G41 or G11? They're about the same. I would recommend either one of them or both of them. I've had a lot more experience with G41 just because they've seemingly been easier to get. A lot more trees have been produced or manufactured on G41. But I have blocks that are half G11 and half G41. I think they're very similar. I think I said last week that anecdotally we got Fire Block and a Pink Lady Block 1 year that was half G41 and half G11. I thought the G11 pulled through it a little better. That's very anecdotal. That's just from my observation. But I think equally I like G41 and G11. Very, very similar rootstocks. Alan Crane says, have you used Bayless blends for fire blight prevention? I have not. I've heard about them. I think I've actually experimented them. I think this is these products like Agrifage or something like that. We're playing with them a little bit, but I don't have a host of experience with those. Heber Hall says, the question regarding Cosmic Crisp were regarding the growing the tree fruit, rather than storage, growing the tree fruit. Yeah. Heber, I have just had really good luck with Cosmic Crisp. We haven't had any sort of internal issues or again, it's my favorite apple. The only problem that I have had with Cosmic Crisp, we lost about 30 acres of Cosmic Crisp last year because it got cold when the apple was about the size of a golf ball, and that apple is very sensitive to cold and it won't take it. We lost about 30 acres of them. Just rusted around the entire apple and destroyed it. So they are very sensitive to that, especially russet from cold weather. But we have not had any problems at all with Cosmic Crisp. I just love that apple. We lay down Mylar for it and it colors up 100% around the apple. Just got a lot of great qualities to it. I hope that answers your question. I just can't say enough good things about Cosmic Crisp, my favorite apple. Vikram Singh Negi says, can you share some guidelines for numbers of fruits according to BCA? And also, does the numbers change for different rootstock and varieties? Absolutely, the numbers would change. I just shared some numbers a minute ago for someone. I was talking about a Geneva 890 for that person. So, no, actually, that was a Geneva 41. I was saying 35 apples for third leaf and 45, 50 apples for fourth leaf. And beyond that, we want a full crop of 80 to 90. But yes, that definitely changes depending on spacing. If you have a tree if you have a bud 9 that's planted 18 inches apart, and we have some of that, you're only in a full production crop, you're only going to expect maybe 40 apples off of that tree. But if you spread that space out to 3 foot on a Geneva 41, you're going to be asking for 80 apples off of that tree. Now, if you have an 890 and you spread that out to 4 feet, you're going to ask for a lot. You're going to ask for 120 apples. I'm making those numbers up. They're close, but you can see the difference. Yes, it will grow exponentially because we're talking about bins per acre, right? And so it's based on that formula of 43,500 square feet. And your spacing in the row and the tree spacing. So yeah, it would change definitely depending on the rootstock, and to some degree on the variety also. Colored varieties on the variety. Maybe not so much on the variety. Hey, Ramos, I know a Jesus Ramos. I'm not sure if it's the same person, but nice to have you on board. I hope that answered that question. So, yeah, definitely makes a difference, especially the rootstock, on how many apples you're going to ask for on a tree. We have a real formula for that. The things you have to take into account on the formula is how big is the apple and how many bins are you looking for an acre. We expect, 22, 24, 40-pound boxes in a bin of apples. So when we talk about an apple, we want the size of an 88. That means there's 88 apples in a 40-pound box. If we're talking about hundreds, that means there's 100 apples in a 40-pound box. So depending on that size, you can see where you're going to need more or less apples depending on the size of the apple. So that's an important part of that calculation also. Mukesh Thakur says, any experience with G214 and comparison of G14 with M9T? I'm sorry, I don't have experience with G214. Second person that's asked about that tonight. Sorry about that. Kanwar Singh Parir says, is it possible to make UFO on Maxima 14 rootstock? Yeah, I think that's possible. I don't work with Maxima a lot anymore. I have worked with them in the past. It's a good rootstock. It's precocious. It's a pretty good root. Is it possible to make UFO on Maxima 14? I think the short answer is yes. If you're wondering what a UFO is, he's not talking about those little lights in the sky that the government's been talking about. He's talking about a horizontal tree, a cherry tree that's planted horizontally, and they have uprights coming off of them, and that's called a UFO. What is that acronym for? UFO. It's not an unidentified flying object. But anyway, he's talking about the UFO. You got to have good growth on those, because the object of those is you're always renewing. Anytime that wood starts getting big at all, you take it out and you grow another one. Since they're growing upright, it'll give you a lot of shoots. Haven't worked with Maxima 14 in probably about the last 10 years, but it's precocious rootstock, and yeah, I think it could pull it off. Perry Fruits is on board. Nice to have you on board. Ishfaq Lone says, why not Gisela 5? Just talked about that a minute ago. I don't like Gisela 5, although I love precocious rootstocks. Gisela 5 is too precocious, and it gives you just way too many cherries. And I'll get a fly in there. One thing we know about cherries is size is king. You have to have big cherries, and I have just never had a Gisela 5 give me a big cherry. They're just not real good about that, and the reason is they produce too many cherries. When they first come out, boy, I thought that was it. They'll come out in the second year and just start giving you wads of cherries, but it's just too much of a good thing. There's too many of them. Go Origami says, what about G3 cherry rootstock, sir? Never had a G3. Sorry about that, but I suspect it's similar to the Gisela 5, but I've never had one. Sorry. Salvador Martinez, on wine grape pruning, do you use the same concept for the table grapes? Yeah, I described that wine grape pruning where we like to decide how many upright spurs that we want. We try to keep everything upright, and we always prune back to the closest buds to the cordon. In other words, we all want to keep that real close to the cordon. And generally, when we're pruning those wine grapes, we're leaving somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 buds to 3 buds to 4 buds, depending on the quality of the fruit and other factors. Some varieties will give you more production than others and still have a quality product. Some you can just expect a higher tonnage. So it really depends on the variety. But your question is, can you use the same concept for table grapes? You can, except you leave a lot more buds. So whereas you would leave, Whereas you would leave 3 buds for a wine grape, as an example, on a Concord or a Niagara or a juice grape, you would leave at least 6. You would be leaving 6 to 9. Now, just as a side note, I went back to college when I was about 50 years old, and on one of my final papers that I wrote it on mechanical. You got some papers flying up there. I wrote it on mechanical farming of Concord grapes, of juice grapes. And what I learned through that study that I went through and that essay that I wrote is it's a lot more effective. It's a lot cheaper. You get higher production over a higher number of years by mechanical pruning juice grapes. So I've completely gotten away from formal pruning on juice grapes, whether it's Concords or Niagaras, and we just prune those with a machine. We just go down there with a hedger and hedge the tops and hedge the sides and walk away from them. And the downside of that is the fruit always wants to move up, just like any other fruit tree. Moves up to the top of the canopy, and after a while you end up with this dead wood that kind of lays under the canopy of the plant, but it's never really seemed to hurt anything, and you can go in there every 10 or 12 years and kind of cut it out of there. But I found the most effective way of pruning juice grapes for me is just mechanical pruning and walking away. It's cheap and it's effective, works pretty well. But if you are going to hand prune them, yes, the short answer is it's very similar to what I showed you on the wine grapes. You just leave a lot more. Instead of leaving 3 buds, leave 6 or 9 buds. You can leave those pretty long. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry about that. Natish Quintetta says, how many years have you been working with G41? I've been working with G41, I think, for, I'm going to say 10 years now. I've been working with them for about 10 years. A couple of things that I learned about them right off the bat is they have a real brittle graft union, where the graft union meets the scion. Normally on a tree, you can hold that tree and kind of stomp it into place. You have to be real careful with a Geneva 41 because, you know, it's not a huge problem, but if you plant a 10-acre block, you'll find at the ends of the rows, you'll find, you know, 30, 40 trees that are broken off at that graft union. They're real brittle at that graft union, so you have to be real careful with that when you're planting them. But beyond that, I've been working with G41 for, you know, probably the last 10 years. Good rootstock. I really like it. Really like it. It's definitely an improvement over previous rootstocks. Jesus Ramos, how do you handle managing an irrigation team when you don't know all the aspects of hydrodynamic? How do you handle managing an irrigation team when you don't know all the aspects of hydrodynamic? Well, I don't know. That's a pretty broad statement, Jesus. You know, I get this sometimes on this channel. My goal for this channel is to make this so simple that my aunt in her backyard down the road can understand everything that I'm saying. I understand plant pathology, I understand agronomy, and I assure you that I understand hydrodynamics and irrigation. I have a great understanding of that. My goal for this channel is to keep things very, very simple so that anyone and everyone can understand it. Jesus, I hope you understand that, but I assure you, I've been doing irrigation for many, many years, and I have a pretty good understanding of irrigation. Thank you. Jerome Empey, when do you know it's time to take a block out of organic back to conventional? Yeah, when it gets away from you, Jerome. We have that happen from time to time. Just when the pressure overwhelms you, it could be from an invasion from the neighbors, you know, that gets in, and it just doesn't become economically feasible anymore to just keep pouring money at it. If it begins to get away from you and you're going to lose the crop, if you're losing control of that, you have to make the decision quick to get in there and pull that out of organic and back into conventional. It's a bummer. You lose 3 years, right? You have to get it back into control, and then the clock starts all over again, and it takes you 3 years to be able to bring that back into organic. Yeah, you know it's time when you're losing control of it and it becomes too expensive and it gets away from you. You'll know. The key is to be conscious of that and make that decision and pull it out when the time is right. I've had to do that quite a bit. Andy Riley, are you a believer in gibberellic acid at straw stage in sweets for size enhancement? Yes, Andy, absolutely. Yeah, we use gib every year. It's a great tool. We use, you know, different rates, whether even a Rainier, we'll do 5 parts per million just to kind of keep it a little harder. You can use those for organic or conventional. They are Omni approved, but big believer in gibberellic acid at straw stage. Absolutely. Be careful. Watch for those rainstorms. Just a word of caution. If you spray gibberellic acid and 2 or 3 days later it rains, those cherries will split wide open. Seen that happen. So when you're spraying that gib, make sure you check the forecast and make sure there's no rain in the forecast because it will split them right open. But yes, I love gibberellic acid. It's nice to have you on board, Andy. Honey, is that all we have? Let's see. I'm going to see. I think we have one more question here. Yeah, I've been working on my backyard trees. I'll do a video here in the next couple days. I've been talking about training and tying, and I've been training and tying those down about every 6 or 7 days. And here I'm in my 2nd year here now. These have been in the ground only for what, about a year and maybe 2 months now. And I about have all my space filled on the wire over there, so I'm real excited about that. Alan Crane, how do you manage heat stress? I suspect he's talking about heat stress on the trees, although we have heat stress in people too. And when you're managing large farms, that's a real issue. There's a lot of things that go along with that, including keeping people hydrated and shade out there and cold water and shade canopies for the workers during their break time. So there's that whole aspect of it. But I suspect you're talking about managing heat stress in trees. How do we manage that? We manage that in some trees like cherries. We'll use products like Surround. But as far as keeping the apple from burning, we do a variety of things. We cool. We have micro sprinklers that will cool the apples and cool the trees. We've kind of gone to misters. Like if you go to a concert and you'll feel the cold misters coming down on you, we've really largely gone to misters for cooling in our blocks. So we have a lot of misters. I'm a big believer in shade cloth. So we have a lot of shade cloth that's out there, and it comes down over the west side of the tree and gives you protection from that afternoon, that real hot afternoon sun. So I'm a big believer in those. So we cool the apples. We use shade cloth, and we use a variety of sun protectants that we spray right in the apple. I like Parka. That's a really good product that kind of stretches over the apple, and it's kind of like a suntan lotion that a person would use. I mean, that's a broad way of putting it. There's also products that are more of a kaolin type product that are white and powdery, and they kind of cover the apple and protect it from that beating sun. So we use a variety of cooling, whether it's water, shade cloths, but also products that we spray on the tree and on the apples to help us with heat stress. Hey, Sue says it was a rhetorical question. I myself don't understand hydrodynamics. Okay, I got you, hey, Sue. Sorry I didn't get your sense of humor there, but the point's still the same. I really do want to keep things simple on this channel. Even I get questions sometimes that are even a little hard for me to understand, but I have studied, agriculture and horticulture and plant sciences, and I've studied viticulture, and I've studied all of that over the years. So it's my hope that I can break that down in its simplest form and share it with you, and I hope that I can learn from you. One of the really cool things that I've enjoyed from this channel is the feedback and learning what's in your orchard and what's in your you-pick blocks and where other people are farming and what you're farming, and that's been a lot of fun. My wife and I both have enjoyed that. So thank you. It's nice having you on board, and again, I wish you a happy Memorial Day. We're going to get out there tomorrow and take a look at some thinning that's going on in the field, and I'll get you updated on cherry harvest, which is coming this week, my favorite time of the year. So that's all I've got. Please click on that follow button, that subscribe button. That helps us. Yeah, glad to have you on board. Good night.